So now the first question, you're going to represent the seller, and after all the rain, the seller calls you and says, hey, just to let you know, we noticed some dampness in the basement. It's not a big deal and we cleaned it up. How do you respond? And since it wasn't a big deal, do you just ignore it?
No.
Definitely not.
Definitely not. That's the right answer. So what should you do?
Now you're going to have to disclose it.
And what would you would use the seller's disclosure amendment? Okay.
Addendum, it's called.
Yes, addendum. Thank you for that. So we don't want the seller's disclosure statement out there, then you retract it and make changes. You should always do the addendum to the seller's disclosure statement. Even though it was minor, guess what? If later on they move in and it happens again, you'll be in trouble. So, all right, so number 2, you represent the buyer this time. And during the inspection notice period, we have a torrential rain. You have already submitted your inspection notice to the listing agent. The buyer calls you and would like to see the basement. Do you tell the buyer, sorry, we can't go back into the house until final walkthrough?
Nope.
Wait, so is this still connected to the leaky basement thingy, or is this separate?
This is this time you have the buyer and you've already submitted your inspection notice, which at that point you can't go back, right? You're not supposed to be able to go back. Once you've submitted your inspection notice, that's supposed to be it. So now we've just had this huge rain and the buyer calls and says, you know what, I want to go back in that house now that we've had all this rain and see it. Do you tell them you can't go back in because that's just not what we do? Or what do you say to your buyer?
Can't you just ask the seller? Or
Yes, you don't. Here's what I don't want you to say is, nope, we can't do that. It's too late. I don't want you to say that. What I want you to say is, hey, I'm going to call the listing agent and you're going to make that request in writing.
okay.
Via email so that you cover yourself. You never know. The listing agent might talk to the seller and the seller says, absolutely, let him come in. But you need to make that request and then keep that request in your file.
And if they say no, you can't make them because they,
Well,
right?
if they tell you no, I'm going to say that my red flag goes up.
Okay.
Unless
But-
they're like, it's,
But
yeah.
legally they don't have to until final
They
walk?
don't. No, and I'll tell you what our agent did. I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to tell you what they did. The seller had already moved out. Our agent called this listing agent and said, hey, my buyer would like to go in and do some measurements. Would that be okay? And they went in to do the measurements, and guess what they found? A leaky basement. So, hey, hold on one second, okay? I think somebody's at my door. Hold on.
I say something?
Sorry. So that was a little bit tricky, but at least she got in there and realized that the basement was leaking. All right, so we'll go on to number 3. On this one, you represent the buyer. They write an offer and it's accepted. They do not have a checking account. Can they get a check from their parents?
Are they getting a loan?
Yes.
Well, they can't.
Well, that's not a good idea to get a check from their parents, because sometimes the lenders require the funds to be verified, all of them.
That's exactly right. Especially, if it's $5,000 or something, that's going to be a heads up to the lender. Where'd you get that money? You have to pay it back. So Everett, since you answered that, what are the options? What would be an option? This buyer does not have a checking account. What would be a good option for them.
Money order? I'm sorry.
A cashier's check or money order, right?
Yep, that's perfect.
Do people actually buy a house and not having a checking account?
Yes, happened last week.
Really? What in the
Oh.
world?
Yep. I thought, when the agent called me, I thought they meant they didn't have the check with them. And so I went down a different path. He's like, no, no, no. They don't have a checking account, period. Yeah,
That is real strange.
It's hard to almost
Hard
believe,
to-
but it's true.
yeah.
It's the new way.
So I have Terry here with me this evening from the home warranty company, Old Republic Home Warranty. So she's going to talk to you guys in here in just a few minutes, okay?
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Terry.
Your name.
Okay, so this is kind of a long question. You represent the seller. You have an accepted offer and the negotiations are complete. We just had 11 inches of rain. The seller calls and tells you their basement is completely flooded with over 4 feet of water. Now what?
Is the seller gonna file an insurance claim?
Yeah, that's right.
So based on the sales contracts, and we're gonna go back and I want you guys to do me a favor, write this down on a pen and paper. I want you to take some time and go back and read paragraph 10. I think it's 10 of the sales contract, but the title is loss, LOSS. I'd really like for you to read that paragraph because it has a lot of stipulations. And Liz, dates and timeframes that you have to comply with. So the seller shall immediately notify the buyer or the selling broker in writing of the damage or destruction, the amount of the insurance proceeds payable, if any, and whether the seller intends to restore the property prior to closing to its condition at the time of the contract. Typically, and this is great, the way Jamie has this picture on here, typically when something that bad happens, the buyer's gonna freak out and probably not want it. If you all remember, probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, we had that tornado come through and it hit that area up by the airport. We had a listing and it was, the house was literally moved off of the foundation, but the buyer went through with it because he got a big chunk of money from the insurance company and we were able to put it together. So what else should the seller provide that's in the contract? So here's the answer. In the event the seller restores the property to its prior condition before the scheduled closing and provides the buyer with proof of repairs, buyer and seller shall proceed with the closing. But we're going to move to the next section. But what happens if the property is not to be restored to its prior condition by the seller before closing? Then what happens?
Well, the buyer can back out for sure.
Yeah.
I think give them a choice.
What's that, Liz?
Okay, actually had this happen. There was a fire and it burnt the house
Oh.
down. And so,
I had that happen.
and it like a week before closing, it wasn't good. But okay, they were offered the insurance, whatever was, the insurance would offer them. They could have had that. They could buy it, reduce the price, whatever. But my seller did not want them to have the house with the insurance because I assumed the insurance was higher than what he was selling it for.
Sure, that could
So-
happen.
So can the buyer insist that the seller give him that coverage and give him
So
that?
here's part 2 to this. Seller shall immediately provide the buyer or selling broker with a copy of any and all policies of the insurance, the name and number of the agent for the said policies, and written authorization for the buyer to communicate with the insurance company. It's really, at this point, it's up to the buyer whether they want to go through with it. It's not up to the seller. So
Can they, no, they can't say, no, you can't have it now.
I don't think so. I think that could be a legal battle. If the
What about-
buyer's willing to take it with the way the contract reads, if the buyer's willing to take the insurance proceeds, then the seller would have to go through with it. That could be illegal. That could definitely.
As it turned out, that's what we had. The sellers, the buyers were going to take it with the insurance. The seller, I had the buyer. The seller was really a piece of work. So my buyer said it's not worth it. We'll buy another house. And they were done. And I think they asked for the money back on all their inspections, and that was it.
Correct. So that's the part, that's the next part here.
Can I jump
Is
in
the
for a
buyer
second?
required to close? And buyer can either proceed with the closing and be entitled to the amount of the insurance proceeds relating to the property improvements, if any, payable to the seller under all policies ensuring the improvements, plus receive a credit from the seller at closing in an amount equal to the deductible. Or they can terminate the contract. So let's say the buyer goes, I don't want anything to do with this. What is the buyer entitled to at that point?
Their earnest money and everything they paid in the inspection, for sure.
Yep, they get their earnest money, they get their inspections, what else?
Any-
Title, survey, appraisal.
Appraisal.
Any cost, I'm guessing.
Yes, any cost that they incurred during the time that they wrote an offer.
And
Yeah.
that can either come directly from insurance money or like. the
No,
seller
comes
No,
from
it
the
comes from
seller.
The seller, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yep, comes from the seller. Now, what kind of with the insurance proceeds are and how that all works, I've never got involved in that.
So quick question, guys. Are we assuming too that the lender is okay with continuing with the buyer taking the damaged
That's,
house? And
yeah, that's another part.
That's Other
And-
thing.
They may
okay.
not be.
so, I mean, the
that's
buyer could
exactly
say
right.
yes and the lender could say no, right?
Correct, absolutely, good point. Yep, so I want to ask again that you all write down to read that paragraph on loss. Because there's dates and timeframes in there too, and I didn't want to incorporate that all into this today because it's a lot to absorb. But it can happen at any time, especially we start getting into tornado weather and things like that, you know. And now when we had 11 inches of rain, we heard St. Peter's really flooded, but I can also tell you that University City suffered a lot.
A bit.
And they seem to get it, U City does, and I don't know if they're lower there, if it's just because it's older. But they had a lot of issues with water backing up and sewer backing up into their house.
I think that particular area of University City has sewer problems, drainage problems,
Mhm.
because they have problems when it rains, you know.
Yep,
It's the area, and the people really should be able to just, you know, give it back to them and tell them to fix it and rebuild and go somewhere else. The mess down there.
Have you heard, I just left an event with a lender and they were saying that there's like kind of from the 25th to the 28th when we had that flooding, that if a house had already had the appraisal, but then there was flooding, they're requiring them to go back out and like take new pictures and stuff. So I didn't know if any of you had had that happen on a
You
listing
mean
or
new
purchase
pictures
or
as far as
anything.
listing?
No, I guess they've got buyers buying houses that were affected by the flood and they're requiring like kind of an updated appraisal and pictures and stuff if they were, you know, involved during that time frame, 25th through the 28th, where they'd
Wow.
already done the appraisal, then it flooded and now they've got to go back out. And she said, take some pictures. And they were
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about like who's incurring the cost of the second
Oh.
inspection. And so I didn't know if any of you guys had that fall within that time frame.
I can tell you on experience, on a second appraisal, the buyer's going to absorb that unless you have a really good lender. So paragraph 12 is the loss paragraph, so make sure you go through that and let me know.
No,
if you have
that's
any
not right,
questions
Lynn.
about that.
You said 10.
Paragraph 14 is loss.
Oh, you said 10.
I have 12 down here, but I might have been
12 is
looking at
earnest
the
money.
special.
Oh, you're on a
Okay.
special sale? No, that's,
Maybe, that might have been what it was, yep.
yeah. In the
Okay.
res sale,
LOSS paragraph, that's what I want you to read. All right, so you represent the seller of a condo villa. You receive an offer from the buyer's agent and they include the condo writer. How much time does the seller have to notify the appropriate board or management company of the proposed sale?
7 days. 7 days.
I
No,
think 1 day.
It's 10,
Monday.
isn't it?
it's 5. Sean's
It's
right.
5.
It's 5. Mhm. So in the event that the appropriate board or management company provides an incomplete information or none at all, what should the seller provide?
Information to the best of his ability.
That's right. So they should prepare and submit to the buyer a substitute form containing information to the best of their knowledge. Seller's good faith compliance with these requirements will not constitute a default. So I think when you're listing a condo, it's in your best interest when you're there with the seller, who's the management company, what's their phone number, what's their contact information, have it available, because guess what happens? Seller goes out of town and now we get an offer and we don't know where the paperwork needs to go.
That information is on the seller's disclosure. It's one of the first paragraphs.
It's supposed to be, you're right, yep, but it seems to be that first page gets passed over somehow a lot of times, or maybe they say they don't know. They have to know, they're paying monthly fees, they should know who they're making their check out to. Okay, any questions about that? So also, let's say that now you've requested, sellers comply, they get their request in within 3 days. How much time
5 days.
does the buyer, when can the buyer say, you know what, I changed my mind, I don't want it? How many days does the seller have to get that to them before they can
Is that on
say,
a
Closing.
resale certificate?
yes,
5 days?
that's right. So up
Can
until
a
they
new-
have it, until you get them possession of the form, they have 5 days to go, yep, I don't like what's on there.
In the old days, I remember somebody went to the closing table it wasn't me, but and they knew they didn't want it, but they waited till they got to the closing table and walked. And
Right,
not a thing they could do.
That's right, they can do
you
that,
get-
for sure.
because
Yep,
I don't think that, if I remember right, I don't have the form in front of me, but I think on the condo writer, it says on this 5 days, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have that, the buyer has to have that information within 5 days of the acceptance deadline.
No.
no,
After
No,
they
it's
get
not.
it, they have 5 days or closing, whichever comes first.
that's right.
Okay.
So that's why it's important, you get an offer accepted, it's important to expedite that process.
You know, the bad thing, Lynn, is a lot of times these guys, they're doing it for nothing. You can't get a hold of them. They drag their feet
Right,
and it's awful.
well, here's the other part, you can't request it in advance. Because
No.
let's say last night, someone fell down the steps and they're
Now there's a lawsuit.
into Brown and Crouppen today about a lawsuit. And you've got an old set of indentures, that's a problem. Because now, Kevin, we don't have the proper information.
True.
Okay, we'll move on. Number 9, you represent the buyer. You have an accepted contract and completed the inspections. There is a financing contingency and you have 10 days before loan commitment deadline. You receive a telephone call from your buyer. They were injured while they were working in the yard. They cannot work and their employer will not pay them while they're out of work. Do you call the listing agent and explain what happened? Do you call the lender? What do you do?
First, I think you got to start with the lender,
Yeah, that's what my guess would be.
because you shouldn't be talking to the other party directly anyway.
First of all, with that question, everything I just read to you is confidential. And unless you have
Why
written
would
permission,
the other eight, I mean, the buyer should call them, not us.
exactly. And if you're going to do anything, you have to have written permission from the buyer to explain that. In this case, I suggested we don't get involved. We don't do anything. The buyer needed to do that. So our agent was getting ready to get on the phone and call the listing agent and tell him, I said, that could backfire on us. So we have to be careful. So without having something in writing from the buyer, we don't do anything.
But you
And
know,
in this case, we walked. I mean, we were able to get out because he wasn't working and the lender sent a denial letter.
right.
I was just gonna say, and fix yourself a drink.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, right? Yeah.
I'm with you, Diana.
Just reading that made me want to get one.
Yeah.
okay.
I can be happy.
I guess a quick question, and I certainly agree about the confidentiality, but I've always read that, like, if something would happen to a house, if it's a material defect, you're supposed to report it immediately and say something. I feel that kind of in a way, even though I know it's wrong, and you're not supposed to say anything, but to me, that's a pretty material fact that should be, it would hurt the seller if he hangs on another 2 weeks, hoping this.
For sure. Yeah.
But
The
and-
seller called our agent and said, listen, I don't know how long I'm gonna, actually, he almost lost his eye in this
Oh, my.
injury, so he was gonna
Well,
be
I mean,
out of
thank
work for
goodness,
quite a
but
while.
I could see where a buyer might say, you know what, I'm going to not tell him, I'm going to try to get by with this. I could just see that happening. And I think I'd say, I'm not representing, I'm out of here.
I'd put it in writing that you strongly recommend they let him know right away, because that's really,
That's just right. Yeah.
exactly.
But you know how that goes.
Yep, I do. Okay, number 10, you represent the seller. You receive an offer from an agent that is purchasing the property for themselves. They write in special agreements. Buyer is purchasing the property and hereby waiving their commission. Thus, the reduction in the asking price. Is that okay? So let's say the house is 200,000 and we got a 3% payout. They're offering 195 because they don't want a commission. Is that okay?
No.
They probably need a few more forms in there.
They can offer that price, but they need to do a commission agreement and not a commission in the
They need a few more-
contract.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna tell you this, the word commission should never appear on any place in a sale contract.
Right.
Nothing. That is a violation of the MREC. So they do not allow us to negotiate commission in a sale contract. Why? Because a contract's between the buyer and the seller. So what's your best resolution? Kathy said, you got to do a commission agreement. So who should prepare that commission agreement?
Well, if they're asking for a reduction in price, I guess the seller's, buyer's agent, I don't know.
That's right. The buyer should prepare a commission agreement. And who signs the commission agreement?
Broker.
You want to hear something that actually happened? So it's broker to broker. It's not agent signature. So let's say Terry's the agent. She writes on my listing and she signs off on the commission agreement. And the day of closing comes along and a couple days later, her broker calls me and says, where's our commission at? We never got it. And I said, oh, Terry waived it. Guess what? Terry doesn't have a right to do.
Oh, no, that's true.
Right, so she cannot waive her commission. Has to be broker and some brokers might say, Terry can reduce her commission by 1.5%, but the company's still gonna take their 1.5%.
That's right. That's right.
Mhm.
We're a little different, but I get it.
Yeah,
I still think you ought
Okay.
to, I try to sign those because then they can't say anything.
right? But if you, what I want you to do, if it's you have the seller and you get a commission agreement like that, do your due diligence and make sure that it's actually the broker that's signing it.
Good idea. Okay.
You give that, you gave her the credit and now the broker's ring, 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 where's my money?
So actually the broker, the seller's broker actually owes that broker that money.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Ow.
Yep. So there's another part to this. What else do you need to do besides a commission agreement? What else is required?
Do you need one of those 1099 things? I don't know.
No.
Now you have to, just,
Oh, an addendum to the listing.
That's right.
Mhm.
Yes. Mhm. And what does that need to say? Reduce the question, reducing the commission for, here's what I want you to remember, for that buyer only.
That's
So
true.
let's say we're paying out 3, we're gonna reduce the commission by 3%, and we just make that a blanketed statement. Terry ends up walking on an inspection. I still have a listing amendment out there that down the seller, we're at closing and the seller goes, oh no, I've got this listing amendment to pay 3%, not 6.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You better make it specific that because they would do that.
Mhm. Yeah, they get mad about something. They had to fix a bunch of things and it costs more money than they thought and they're aggravated. And all they have to do is pull out that listing amendment and guess what? You might
Yeah.
not be getting paid.
Yeah.
So just remember, for if you're in that situation, you use for Terry only or for, whoever that buyer is.
Yeah.
Okay, number 11, you represent the buyer. Sewer Pros conducted an inspection and suggested very specific repairs. Because it's a conflict of interest for them to make the repairs, they suggested 2 different companies. You send the agent the inspection notice and the video of the necessary repairs. You write in the inspection notice, seller to repair the sewer lateral issues according to the attached report. Is that okay?
No. I would say attached to the bid or something myself. Attached to the bid that was received or something like that.
So guess what happens? The 2 people that Sewer Pros recommended are very reputable companies. But we didn't tell them to use one of those reputable companies in our inspection notice. So, guess what they did?
They hired John Doe.
That's right.
right, that's right.
And then the seller's in control and says, guess what the seller did? Hey, just take out those roots, pull out the roots, and don't worry about fixing the line, the lateral line. Just pull out the roots.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Here's the lesson. And I think some of you probably heard me tell this story before, but I'm trying to make an impact. I had an agent who said roof must be replaced. Didn't go into detail, didn't say take off the old roof, right? And then the seller goes down to Lowe's and over in the corner is this big clearance sale on red shingles. And that's what they bought. And our buyer drives by and sees these red shingles going up on that house. We were able to put a stop, but it cost money to do that. And they were not taken off the first. So when you're doing your inspection notice, it's always a good idea because you're trying to take things and move it forward. Ask one of your colleagues, say, hey, Terry, do you mind reading this and tell me what it says? I'm not going to tell her what I want it to say. What do you think this says? Because someone else reading it might say, hey, you forgot to put in there the company that you want to do it. If I'm having a roofer replace the roof, I'm going to ask that roofer puts it on because I know that person. I know they do a good job.
And I usually put in there that seller will allow the buyer to pick the color as long as it's agreeable or something like that.
I
You
like
know.
that. And I think that's smart. Very smart, Liz. I don't know if anybody else has, had that situation happen to you before, but in this case, we were able to get it repaired properly, but it had to be a battle, and partly because we didn't say you have to use one of these two companies. 'Cause
You mean
this other
somebody did that? Somebody was going to put a red, that's a true story?
Yes.
Awful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
because they were at Lowe's. Somebody had ordered them and brought them back, and they're in the corner on the clearance sale.
I just
So
can't
if you-
imagine being like that. Wow.
I love to tell you stories because that's something that actually happened in my office, and that's why if you remember, when you're writing your inspection notice, oh, I don't want a red roof on there, so I better be specific about what it is.
Same thing. I had this happen to an agent on new construction. The house was almost done, but the island wasn't in yet. And so she just put in her contract, builder to, install the center island. Well, guess what? Those people were furious because they got there and it was like a white kitchen and, had like white granite or marble. And they got there and the island was like, this cherry red color with black top granite. It didn't even match. It was like he just stuck an island in there. So similar
probably.
thing,
Yeah.
they should have worded it like, install a 3-foot white matching cabinet, matching marble. So it's just the very specifics.
Yep, and in
Definitely
this
help.
case, I think your follow-up to that is that the seller, after they do this repair work, pay to have it re-videoed and supply that back to your buyer, and it needs to be to your buyer's satisfaction.
Yeah.
And
You know.
sometimes that's a lot of extra words, but it helps. If a seller's trying to make a shortcut, they look at that. And this was a seller who did try to make shortcuts.
Obviously.
Okay, we'll move on. Number 12, you represent the seller. The next door neighbor's tree fell on the roof of your listing. Who is responsible?
The neighbor.
This neighbor. Do you have a contract on it?
Yeah, it could be, you could have a contract or not. In this case, doesn't matter. It's, and we've had a lot of trees around here uprooted, and it just fell on your new listing. Who is responsible for the roof?
I guess I would call my insurance guy and my insurance guy would fight with them.
So
Right.
typically, it's your seller that's
I mean,
responsible,
seller-
even though
I
it's the neighbor's
My seller
tree.
would call their insurance company and say, go get them.
So sometimes, if the tree is in bad shape and the next door neighbor's been warned about the tree is dead, it needs to be removed and that sort of thing. But typically it's gonna fall on the homeowner of the house. This was just kind of an FYI thing that's happened. I saw several of them in New City. What's that?
Which house? You said the owner, the list.
Owner of the house, not of the tree.
Oh, of the house. Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
That's such a bummer, especially if the neighbor knows.
If you got a good neighbor, maybe they'll perhaps pay the deductible. But I think most of us today have a pretty high deductible to try to get our insurance down, so they may not.
That's
Okay,
good.
you represent the buyer. As you prepare the inspection notice, the buyer tells you they don't want to ask for a lot on their original request because they want to try to negotiate and may ask for other items later. How do you advise them?
You can't do that later. You got to do it now.
How is she gonna do it?
Well, they can ask for more later when they're negotiating, but if it comes down to the end of the inspection notice, the seller can go back and repair everything that they originally asked for. So if they
That's
didn't
right.
ask for much, then they're just SOL. They're only going to get what they asked for originally, or else the buyer's going to take it without anything.
I thought you
Right,
could
so,
add stuff later. If you ask for that and you
oh,
decide.
you can,
Oh,
you
yeah.
absolutely can.
Oh, I
but-
did not know that.
the seller can, anytime can come back and say, okay, like, let's say the buyer says, okay, we're gonna walk. Seller can go, oh, no, we'll do everything you originally asked us to do. So that's just caution, a word of caution, especially in this market. I know it's starting to get a little better, but still, I'm still seeing agents write no inspections or just for minor things. So be careful what you write, be careful what you ask for.
Okay, so I'm just, so I know, because I think this happened to an agent that's no longer in our office, but I think this happened. She asked for some stuff and they, the seller said, no, we're not gonna do this, but we'll do this. And they just got kind of mad at each other. So the buyer says, you know what, I don't want the house anymore. And the guy goes, no, 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 I will fix what you originally asked for. And they had to buy, they had to go through. Is that true?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
that's exactly right.
So if they're going to get out of the purchase because of an inspection, they have to do it immediately. They're not after they start asking
Yeah,
for.
or you just don't tell the listing agent that you're gonna walk, and at midnight you send it of the last day, midnight, so it's the next day you send over the mutual release. But that's a game some agents
I'd be
like to
afraid to
play.
play that, but yeah, you're right. That could happen. Yeah.
Well, and the seller
Okay.
doesn't have to agree to the mutual release.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But technically, if it was in the timeline, they almost don't have a case on it, right?
No, I can make them go through with it, yeah. So you receive a call from a potential seller. They begin the conversation by stating, I need to close on this house by the end of the month. You see a red flag. What's the why, the urgency? I'm gonna ask Everett to elaborate on this a little bit, because guess what? They haven't paid their property taxes for how long do you think?
Years, probably 6 years.
3 years.
Three
I'll
years.
say 3 years.
Yeah.
Everett?
Yeah, it'd be 3 years. I mean,
Yeah.
the deadline.
And so Everett, what if I come up, I owe 3 years and it's $2,500 a year. How could I stop that process from happening?
You have to come up with at least $2,500 and make a payment to avert the tax sale.
Yep.
So as long as Everett actually has a situation going on like this, so as long as the seller gets that money in there on time and pays one of those years, the oldest one, they'll be able to hold on to it for another year.
Okay.
But you'll see things like that happens when people inherit houses, or there's been, some sort of a family tragedy of some sort, and the person who inherited, maybe they don't have the money to pay the taxes. And instead of finding a real estate agent to help them get it sold, they just sit there and hold it for some reason.
Yeah.
That might be a good place to look for business, is find an attorney that handles.
Taxes.
Yes, yes,
Interesting.
okay. But Liz,
Yes.
did you say something?
Oh, I said interesting.
Yep. So you represent the buyer. The buyer has a lot of interest in and have been told by the listing agent that you're in a multiple offer situation. You write the offer, and in these special agreements, inspections for informational purposes only. Can your buyer walk?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, they can.
if they're accepting it for as is.
But I want you to be aware of that too. When you're in a multiple offer situation, you have the seller and you have somebody write that in. Don't think that, oh, they're just gonna have an inspection, but they're not gonna ask us for anything. They can walk. But sometimes, and I've had this happen recently, where we did have the buyer and the seller said, wait, don't walk. I think we can negotiate some things on the repairs. So what if you delete paragraph 10 and write in the inspections, write in inspections for informational purposes only? Can your buyer walk? when you delete the paragraph for inspections, you're gonna delete that paragraph.
No, they can't walk then.
No. So this just happened, all these scenarios just happened, and in this case, I wrote in here 10,000, but we'd actually put up $25,000 earnest money check. And our buyer had an inspection, and there were termites from in the basement, went up through the entire, what's the board called? Sill.
Plate.
Thank you.
Still plate.
The sill plate, and went all the way up to the roof of the house.
Oh my God.
Somebody
Yes.
sneezed, that place would fall.
So here's what happened. The listing agent called and said, yeah, we'll let you walk, but we're keeping your $25,000 earnest money. First thing I want to see the seller's disclosure statement. They claimed that they had a termite inspection and there wasn't any. And here we are. We did get our money back and were able to walk. And I noticed day before yesterday that house closed. And the seller's disclosure statement was not modified.
Oh,
Ooh.
somebody's, oh my God.
So you were able to get out of that because the seller's disclosure was incorrect and they falsely.
That's right. That's the only thing I had to hang my hat on.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
It was a battle. I'm gonna tell you, it wasn't.
I hope that other buyer didn't waive inspections or something.
But someone
I'll
else,
tell you, if that other buyer finds out, they're gonna be, and it's obviously it was over
There's
800,000.
damage under that drywall. Oh my God.
Yeah.
my God. Well,
Well, our buyer, when the inspector was there, wanted to get behind a part of the wall in the basement. And so we made a request to the seller and they said, no, we don't want you taking anything down.
Ooh.
Red flag. Yeah.
Yeah.
well, now, if, so it was back, they sold it to someone in the condition it was in, right? And it closed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So.
We think.
She put it back active and the next day it went pending and it closed in less than a month.
So you know they didn't do it.
You know they
Did-
didn't.
Did it close for the right price, a good price?
Yeah,
Oh, they're gonna have the.
there was not a concession made on the price.
I thought maybe there was a
Actually,
price.
it was $100 and some $1,000 over asking price.
Oh my,
Holy cow.
I would not be that agent for nothing. Mm-mm.
Oh, God.
And I always thought this person was very reputable. I respected her and I saw that and I'm struggling with it.
I don't know, if they can sleep at night.
I was gonna sneak the buyer a note.
I know.
I mean,
Yeah.
because they're gonna end up with terrible.
That's just one to stay out of.
Oh, for sure. Yep.
Wow.
Okay, so you represent the buyer. The seller didn't get all of the items out of the house until the night before closing and would not allow a final walkthrough until 8 o'clock at night. During the walkthrough, you discover the sellers have taken the washer and dryer. Now what?
Is this 8 o'clock the day before closing?
Yes, ma'am. Closing's 9:30 the next day.
Oh, God.
I'd probably have to say stop. Stop.
We're not
Well,
gonna.
we cannot tell our buyer not to close, ever. Those words should not be in your mouth
No,
because,
Well, it would be
Yes.
like them. We'd say, what do you want to do?
yes, but we never tell a buyer not to close that.
Oh,
they'll-
God. No.
Or that they should close because they'll be in breach. We're not attorneys and those are words that will definitely land you in court if they don't close, or if they do close, then they're gonna try to sue everybody. So.
So what say?
So here's what happens. It's a really nice washer and dryer and it's got the stands underneath and everything. And so, and this is a couple getting a divorce. And so they had put the washer and dryer in a pod. And what they wanted to do was after the wife got moved into her new place, they would bring the washer and dryer back. Well, that's probably not a good idea because we don't know the condition they're going to be in and they're mad. And So they offered our buyer $1,000 and our buyer wanted $2,500.
At least.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, and in today's market, you could go in and find something you really like and you may not get it for 6 months, the washer and dryer that you want.
That I'm hearing that, yeah.
Yeah. So I was able to get the $2,500 by getting involved with the broker, but how do I get my buyer that money? And do I accept a personal check?
No.
I-
Never.
Never. Thank you. You guys are so smart. No. He went and got a cashier's check, and so it worked out. I think this happens more and more, especially when we get involved with personal property, and we try to avoid that as much as possible. But you know, even if we had done a walkthrough 4 days before, they were still moving all their stuff out. We may not have known that they took the washer and dryer, and then we'd have a whole new situation. But that 4 days before closing, that's always when I get asked that question, what's best? 4 days before or 1 day before? I don't really have a good answer for that. If
I
they're
guess
still
maybe-
moving out, how do you know? And if it's the night before, and now we're closing, in 12 hours, how does that work? What
That's
do
when
you do,
I-
Liz? Typically, what's your day that you usually
Well,
select?
I would sign one of those final walkthrough notice, get it to the agent immediately and say, what do you, and ask the buyer what they want to do. And like you said, if they have to be out of their house, there's not much choice, they have to get out. But like you said, that's when I'm glad I'm in Washington, because most of the agents down here are pretty decent and we would work it out. But
Well, in this case, it really wasn't the agent's fault. It was, this was a divorce situation, and he was moving really far away. And so the whole deal was iffy.
But I meant the agent would go to the seller and say, what are you
Yeah.
doing?
This
That's-
isn't right. Yeah,
Yeah.
gotta make it right.
I hope, but
Boy,
Okay, so you receive a call from your buyer. They just spotted a for sale by owner on Zillow. How do you proceed? What do you need to do? What's the first thing you do?
buyer's agency. If you want a buyer's
Yep,
agency.
you better have one for your buyer.
One time, showing,
boy, they didn't buy it, they just saw it on Zillow.
Yeah, they called you.
Oh.
You've got a buyer's agency, and they called you and said, hey, I just saw this house on Zillow. What do I need to do? Sean, what do I need to do?
First, you call the seller and see if they're willing to work with an agent.
That's
First,
right.
if they are, then you do the showing
authorization.
The-
One-time authorization.
One-time showing.
sign
Authorization to show.
authorization to show.
No,
That's it.
you can't do that. I'm sorry, you cannot do that. I apologize. No, you have the buyer, you can't do that.
Can't do what?
Okay, let's let
Yes, you can.
Sean tell, let's let Sean talk, okay? Because this
I'm
just
sorry.
happened now. Yeah,
So yeah, you talk to the seller and if they're willing to work with an agent, are they willing to pay
Yep.
the commission? If not, then you have to go back to your buyer and ask them if they're willing to pay your commission. If everybody agrees and you figure out who's going to pay the commission, then you do an authorization to show
You're
to
right.
that's right.
the seller, and then you can show it.
That's right. So here's one thing I want to caution you about the authorization to show. There's a question on one of the lines about what's the buyer's names. I want you to add in there clients of Sean Reeser, clients of Liz Stemley. Don't put the buyer's names there, because guess what can happen?
They
With
call,
social media being the way it is today, that person can call your client and say, hey, dump Liz, let's not bring her in on that. and I'll sell it to you cheaper.
And it does happen.
Yes.
So never put your buyer's name in. I mean, eventually, if you write the offer, that's gonna happen, but at that point, you've got a signed contract.
Right.
So asking the buyer to pay the commission is okay, but you still have to do you cannot show it without the authorization to show. Okay,
Or one party
okay,
listing.
so Terry's got something she wants to talk to you about real quick, okay?
Hi, everyone. If I hadn't came from another event, I was gonna wear like my inspector gadget outfit with like, a trench coat with my collar up and glasses, because I feel like it's like a private eye, like secret warranty. And I'm just bringing this up because I'm not saying Remax Gold is doing it, but I've had it happen 3 times in 6 weeks. So that's once every 2 weeks. So I am seeing it throughout the industry. And I think what's happened is, warranties haven't been used as much during the seller's market. And now we're going back into a phase where warranties are being used again. However, they're not necessarily being used like back in the old days, like my days, where we just always got the warranty accepted on a contract. Because when it's accepted on the contract, it's right there for everybody to see, right? But we're getting a lot of people that are working out warranties on the building inspection or the walkthrough, during that time frame after the contract is already accepted. So it's not on the contract, and that means maybe it's not on your checklist. If you have a checklist for your closing packet, that box of waiving it's already been marked, but now you get it accepted later. So what is happening is I'm getting phone calls from homeowners saying, I'm trying to file a claim and they keep telling me they're not finding my warranty. So I'm like, okay, let me help you. What's your address? And then I'm not finding it in my system. And now I'm calling the agent and saying, hey, when did you get this warranty? And they're like, oh, I got it in the building inspection. So we backtrack and we find out they got it in the building inspection, but they never gave an amendment to the title company, or maybe they never gave their contract to close person their building inspection. And so basically warranties are not getting ordered. Now, I'm not worried about me, having your order as much as I'm worried about you, because what's happening is now the homeowner not only doesn't have a warranty, but they also now want you to pay for their repair, right? They're like, okay, you were supposed to get me a warranty. You didn't make sure I had it. So now who's going to pay for my repair? And now, even though we know agreements survive closing, you still have sellers saying, forget it, I'm not paying for it because I'm already closed. So now you got the poor brokers having to step in and try to battle it out. So I'm just saying, think about it. I know it's new, kind of having the warranties accepted more later in the contract, but try to just put a checklist or something in place, ask your broker, ask your manager the best way they want you to handle that. But I just think we have to be more aware that it might have gotten, not waived on your original checklist, but then added later. Because I think the fact that I've had it happen 3 times in 6 weeks means it's something out there that's happening.
You know what
I just
happened?
wanted to tell you and just think about it for the future and keep that in mind.
Sometimes I find that when you get the closing statement and you represent the buyer, they don't have that on there because you're not seeing the seller side. So the seller is the one paying for it, and you kind of forget. So you do have to make yourself a note, because you don't see that. And if it's not on the seller's side, you don't know it till you're sitting at the table. So
it might not be on your statement, but you should still have your invoice in your closing packet that showed like you ordered it or something.
Okay, but what if the seller's ordering it and you got the buyer?
If I knew that I had worked it out in a building inspection, I would still ask the seller to provide me a copy of the invoice.
That's why
so
I'm
that I
saying
can
be aware. Yeah.
something.
Yeah, and your title company should be asking, it's my opinion, they should be asking the other side for a paid receipt and the number, what's the
Invoice number.
Confirmation.
Yes.
number.
Yes, the warranty number. Yes,
Right.
thank you,
Yeah.
Kathy.
Can I pipe in for a second? So
Yes,
On my closing of my house, we had offered a home warranty. And so it was supposed to be on there, done. We sign everything. It was, a busy day or whatever. And then we were basically done with everything. I think we had signed everything. And then I just was like, wait a minute. I don't think I saw the home warranty anywhere on that. Is that in there? Did you provide that on the closing? And they were like, oh, no. So the title company had messed up and didn't have it in there.
Yeah.
So even if it's in the contract, it's still a really good idea to make sure at
Right,
closing.
good catch on your part.
I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, had I not asked, what would have happened? I don't know.
It's scary, isn't it?
Well, I think it's good too, when you have a person who's an investor and they're buying property, to recommend that they offer a home warranty, have it on there for their tenants. And they can say, hey, this happens, here's who you call, and you will pay the deductible. Let the tenant pay it.
Yeah, if an investor has a long-term tenant, they can even list the tenant as the contact person.
Oh,
That way they can call in claims or whatever. I do have investors that do that. But
Cool.
yeah, it's just kind of weird that it's happened so much. I just wanted to mention it because I kind of like calling it the secret warranty because it's, but unfortunately it does snowball into a bigger issue.
oh gosh,
We
yeah.
have one going on right now and the broker, they absolutely should pay for it. They have it in writing and it should survive closing, but that seller and that broker are still refusing to pay for it.
Oh, wow.
And so the other broker and agent are splitting it right now just to get it done, and try to get it. If you ever have that happen, call me because what I'm trying to do is get it backdated for them so that they have coverage that's not costing them the 30-day delay, not costing them any exclusions on, so we're trying to get it backdated to the original close date. So always keep me posted on that so I can try to help.
Well, it's a good negotiating tool too, where the buyer's making all these requests that you come back and say, I'm not gonna fix these things or whatever, because I don't feel like they're not broken, they're working, but I will buy you a home warranty plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming this evening. Does anybody have any questions or something they want to talk about?
Yeah, I have one question. In reference to the seller's disclosure and disclosing about things about water damage and flooding and things of that nature. One of my listings, the one in the city, that's the condo on the Bolivar. If you remember, I think the Metrolink station on the Bolivar was flooded.
Yeah, that was.
Well, the Bolivar is the street right over from the Metrolink, and the water was so high that several people's cars were damaged, and they're
Oh, my.
still on the street. They haven't been towed. And when I went by to visit the listing, I think on Monday, I noticed that several cars were obviously damaged from the water. And my seller said, well, this is the first time in the 25 years that he's lived there that this has ever happened. And I thought, well, is that something that should be disclosed or not?
So it was the street and the cars, not the property.
Right.
Because
if you had a guest that was staying with you and they couldn't park in the garage or an area that was protected, but they had to park on the street, that could potentially be something that you might want to disclose in the future, because even though it's not happened in the past, it happened this time. And several people's cars, I think there were, he said there were about a dozen cars that people were pushing out of the water
Gosh.
when this happened. So
Well, you'll never hear me say, don't disclose, because I'm not. If there's something that happened, hey, last week when we had torrential rain, the street flood, put it in there.
Yeah.
isn't there something like if there's a hazardous factory going in, you're supposed to if they
Oh, absolutely.
wouldn't that be the
Yes.
same thing?
Yeah,
I mean, even though it hadn't happened before, but the fact that it was obvious a problem. I mean, it was to me kind of scary. I said, well, suppose I was visiting someone here or was
Mhm.
staying for an extended period of time and this flood came along, my car would potentially be in harm's way. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
something that people should know about if they're gonna buy something.
I think,
Well, no, people only have, liability insurance and their car gets damaged or flooded.
wow.
Yep.
Good information, Lynn.
Okay, thank you. All
Sorry.
right, thank you all.
Bye.
Thanks, Lynn.
Okay.